You are tired in a way that sleep does not fix. You wake up. You move through the day. You do what is expected of you. But underneath all of it, there is a quiet tension that never fully leaves. It sits in your chest. It tightens your jaw. It follows you into the evening and waits for you again in the morning. A single unexpected message can shift your entire mood. A careless word from someone at work can circle inside your head for days. A small change in your plans can feel like the ground has moved beneath you. And by the end of the day, you are not exhausted from what you did. You are exhausted from what you felt. From reacting. From resisting. From carrying the weight of things that were never yours to carry. Most people accept this as the cost of being alive. They believe that the noise inside their head is permanent. That emotional chaos is simply the price of existing in a complicated world. But what if that is not true? What if the exhaustion is not a condition, but a pattern? And what if that pattern has already been solved by someone who faced more pressure than most of us will ever know? Nearly 2,000 years ago, a man named Marcus Aurelius governed the largest empire the world had ever seen. He did not inherit peace. He inherited plague, famine, war on every border, betrayal from people he trusted with his life. By every measure, his circumstances should have broken him. The weight of his responsibilities alone would have crushed most people alive today. But he is not remembered for breaking. He is remembered for something far more unusual. A deep and deliberate calm that he carried through every crisis. Not because his life was quiet, but because he trained his mind to be quiet regardless of what his life looked like. He wrote in his private journal words he never intended for anyone else to read. And in those pages, he left behind something extraordinary. Not a philosophy of comfort, but a manual for building a mind that external chaos cannot reach. Today we are going to walk through 11 of those principles, not as history, not as theory, but as something you can begin applying to the way you think and respond, starting now. These are not motivational ideas. They are structural changes to the way your mind processes the world around you. And if you have been looking for a place that treats inner work with the seriousness it deserves, then subscribing to this channel is a step in that direction, not for entertainment, but for the kind of clarity that changes how you move through your days. One principle at a time. The first principle is the one that holds all the others together. Most of your suffering comes from a single confusion. You spend enormous amounts of energy trying to control things that were never within your power. You try to manage what other people think of you. You try to predict the future. You try to make every outcome safe before it arrives. And when reality refuses to cooperate, you feel as though something has gone wrong. But nothing went wrong. You were simply operating outside your jurisdiction. Marcus Aurelius wrote a line that functions like a compass for the rest of your life. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. There is a border that runs through every situation you will ever face. On one side are things you can influence, your effort, your interpretation, your response, your discipline. On the other side are things you cannot influence. Other people's behavior, the economy, the past, the weather. What has already been said. Most people spend the majority of their energy on the wrong side of that border. They fight in territories they do not govern. And every hour spent there is an hour of peace lost. When you begin to redirect your focus entirely toward what you can actually affect, something shifts, not dramatically. Quietly. The external noise continues, but the internal panic begins to lose its grip. Not because the world became easier, but because you stopped demanding that it be something it was never going to be. You stopped negotiating with chaos and started governing yourself. When something goes wrong, most people experience it as a wall. A project fails, a relationship ends, a plan collapses, and the immediate response is a feeling of being blocked, stopped, punished by circumstance. The mind tells a story of victimhood. Why is this happening to me? This is not fair. I was on the right path, and now it is gone. But Marcus Aurelius saw obstacles from a completely different position. He understood that resistance is not a punishment. It is raw material. He recognized that what stands in the way becomes the way. The obstacle is not separate from the path. It is the path. When a difficult person tests your patience, they are not ruining your day. They are offering you a chance to practice composure under pressure. When a failure exposes a weakness, it is not branding you as incompetent. It is showing you exactly where your next growth lies. When plans fall apart, the empty space that remains is not a void. It is an opening. This does not mean you pretend difficulty feels good. It means you stop interpreting difficulty as a signal to quit. You begin to see it as a signal to adapt, to sharpen, to find the angle you were not looking for. Seneca captured this when he observed that a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. The pressure is not the problem. The pressure is the process. And the people who understand this become very difficult to stop. Because every obstacle they meet becomes one more tool in their hands. There is a habit so common that most people do not even recognize it as harmful. Complaining. It moves through conversations like background noise. You bond with people over shared frustrations. You narrate your inconveniences as if they deserve an audience. And on the surface, it feels like release, like you are letting off pressure. But something else is happening underneath. Every time you vocalize a complaint, you are sending a signal to your own mind. The signal says, I am powerless in this situation. Someone or something is doing this to me, and I cannot respond. You are reinforcing the identity of someone who is acted upon rather than someone who acts. Marcus Aurelius held himself to a standard that left no room for this habit. He believed that if a situation can be endured, then endure it without protest. And if it truly cannot be endured, then the situation itself will end. Either way, the complaint serves nothing. This is not about suppressing emotions. It is about choosing what you do with the energy behind them. When you feel the impulse to complain, you are feeling energy. That energy can be directed into noise, or it can be directed into movement, into solution, into acceptance, into the quiet dignity of someone who meets difficulty without narrating it. The next time frustration rises in your chest, notice the impulse to speak it. And instead of following that impulse, let it pass. Sit with the discomfort for a moment. You will find that it does not destroy you. It simply moves through you. And what remains on the other side is clarity. Your mind is rarely where your body is. While you sit at your desk, your mind is replaying something that happened last week. While you eat dinner, your mind is projecting catastrophic versions of next month, and you are physically present but mentally scattered across timelines that do not actually exist. And the weight of carrying all those timelines at once is what creates the sensation of being overwhelmed. Marcus Aurelius gave himself a direct instruction. Do not let the full weight of your life crush you. Do not dwell on every trouble that has come before or may come after. Simply ask yourself about this present moment. What is here right now that is truly beyond endurance? The answer, almost every time, is nothing. The present moment by itself is almost always survivable. What makes it feel unbearable is everything you are adding to it. Yesterday's regret, tomorrow's fear, next year's uncertainty, You are trying to carry the weight of your entire life in a single second, and no mind was built for that. When you train yourself to narrow your focus to only what is in front of you right now, something extraordinary happens. The overwhelm dissolves, not because your problems disappeared, but because you stopped trying to solve all of them simultaneously. You only ever have to survive one moment. And for this moment, you have exactly enough. How often does someone else's behavior ruin your peace? A friend cancels without explanation. A stranger is rude for no reason. Someone you trusted tells a lie. And each time it happens, you feel a shock, as if you expected the world to operate with fairness and decency. That expectation is the source of the pain, not the behavior itself. Marcus Aurelius began each morning with a practice that might sound harsh, but was deeply protective. He reminded himself that the people he would encounter that day would include those who are dishonest, ungrateful, and driven by ego. Not because he hated humanity, but because he refused to be surprised by its imperfections. This is not cynicism, it is preparation. When you anticipate that people will sometimes act from fear or ignorance or selfishness, their behavior loses its power to destabilize you. You are not caught off guard. You are not personally offended. You observe it the way you would observe weather. It is happening. It is not directed at you, and it doesn't require your emotional participation. Epictetus taught the same principle from a different angle. He reminded his students that when someone behaves poorly, the disturbance is not in their action, but in your expectation that they should have acted differently. When you release the expectation of perfection from other people, you stop handing them the key to your inner state. Their chaos remains theirs. Your calm remains yours. And the distance between those two things becomes the most valuable boundary you will ever build. There is a difference between what happens to you and what you tell yourself about what happens to you. That difference is where most of your suffering lives. When you lose a job, the event itself is neutral. A professional arrangement has ended. That is the fact. But your mind does not stop at the fact. It builds a story around it. I am not good enough. I will never recover. People are judging me. My life is falling apart. The fact was manageable. The story is what makes you unable to breathe. Marcus Aurelius practiced a method of stripping experience down to its bare components. He would look at something the world considered impressive or terrible and describe it in the simplest possible terms, not to diminish it, but to see it clearly without the emotional distortion. He understood that the mind is a relentless storyteller. It takes raw events and wraps them in drama. It adds villains. It adds permanence. It adds meaning that was never there to begin with. And if you do not catch this process in action, you end up living inside a story rather than inside reality. The practice is not complicated. When something difficult happens, pause before you respond. Identify the raw fact. Separate it from the narrative your mind is already constructing. You will find that the fact alone is almost always something you can work with. It is the story that paralyzes, and stories can be rewritten. When life becomes overwhelming, the instinct is to escape, to book a trip, to change the environment, to find somewhere quieter. And sometimes that helps temporarily. But the mind you bring with you to the mountains is the same mind you had in the city. The noise does not come from the location. It comes from within. Marcus Aurelius recognized this clearly. He wrote that nowhere can a person find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in their own soul. The real sanctuary is not geographic. It is architectural. It is something you build inside yourself through practice. You build it through small daily periods of stillness, not meditation in the formal sense necessarily, but moments where you deliberately stop consuming. Stop scrolling. Stop talking. And simply sit with whatever is present inside you without trying to fix it or escape it. Over time, this practice creates an internal space that becomes accessible even in chaos. A room inside your own mind where the noise of the world cannot reach. Not because you have shut the world out, but because you have built something strong enough to exist alongside it. This inner citadel does not require perfect conditions. It does not require silence or solitude. It requires only the willingness to turn inward for a few moments each day. And what you find there over time is not emptiness. It is stability. The kind that does not depend on anything outside of you. There is a quiet form of imprisonment that most people never recognize. It is the habit of adjusting who you are based on who is watching. You soften your opinions in certain rooms. You perform confidence when you feel doubt. You curate your image so carefully that the version of you the world sees has very little to do with the person you actually are. And underneath that performance, there is a constant low-level exhaustion. The effort of maintaining an image you did not choose. Marcus Aurelius found something deeply absurd in this pattern. He observed that we all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own. The contradiction is quiet, but devastating. You trust yourself less than you trust the crowd, and the crowd does not even know its own mind. Letting go of this does not happen through anger or rebellion. It happens through a slow recognition. The opinions of others are interpretations. They are filtered through that person's own fears and insecurities and limited perspective. They carry no physical weight. They change nothing about who you actually are unless you pick them up and hold them. When you begin to live according to your own values, rather than the approval of the room, something lightens. You stop performing. You stop calculating. You say what you mean. You move how you move. And the energy you once spent managing perceptions becomes available for something far more important. Becoming the person you actually want to be. There is a trap that catches many people who are drawn to ideas like these. They read. They collect insights. They discuss philosophy with sophistication. They can quote Marcus Aurelius from memory. But when someone cuts them off in traffic, they explode. When a plan fails, they crumble. When discomfort arrives, they retreat. The knowledge is there. The behavior has not changed. Marcus Aurelius addressed this directly with one of the most efficient sentences ever written. Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one. It does not matter how many books line your shelf if you cannot stay calm when someone insults you. It does not matter how many podcasts you have listened to about discipline if you abandon your commitments the moment they become uncomfortable. Understanding is not the same as practice, and practice is the only thing that changes who you actually are. This is where most people stall. They confuse the consumption of wisdom with the embodiment of it. They prepare endlessly but never begin. They plan the life they want to live, but never take the first uncomfortable step into it. Swarth, the shift is simple, but it is not easy. Stop studying the path. Start walking it, even if the steps are small, even if no one is watching, especially if no one is watching. Because character is not what you do when the world is looking. It is what you do when it is not. There is a battle that happens every morning, and most people lose it before they are fully awake. The alarm sounds. The warmth of the bed holds you. And the first thought of the day is a negotiation. Not yet. A few more minutes. I do not feel ready. You begin the day by surrendering to comfort, and that surrender sets the tone for everything that follows. Marcus Aurelius, who had every luxury available to a Roman emperor, wrote a reminder to himself about this exact moment. When you have trouble getting out of bed, remember that you were made for a purpose. You were not created to lie under blankets and seek warmth. You were built to act, to serve, to rise. This is not about punishing yourself for wanting rest. It is about recognizing that the feeling of readiness almost never comes first. Action comes first, and motivation follows. If you wait until you feel like doing the difficult things, you will wait indefinitely, because the mind will always prefer safety. There is a simple practice here. When the morning arrives, do not consult your feelings. Feelings are not instructions. They are weather. They shift constantly, and they are not reliable guides for how to live. Instead, move. Put your feet on the floor. Begin. Not because you feel strong, but because the act of beginning is what creates strength. Over time, this practice rewires the relationship between intention and action. You stop waiting for permission from your emotions, and you start trusting the discipline that carries you forward even when the emotions resist. There is one truth that sits beneath everything we have discussed. A truth so uncomfortable that the modern world has built an entire culture around avoiding it. You are going to die. Not as a metaphor, not as a distant abstraction, as a fact. Marcus Aurelius did not avoid this fact. He held it close. He wrote that you could leave this life at any moment, and that this awareness should shape what you do and say and think. This is the practice the Stoics called memento mori, the remembrance of death. And despite how it sounds, it is not a dark practice. It is the most clarifying lens you will ever look through. When you view your current problems through the filter of your own mortality, something remarkable happens. The trivial falls away instantly. The grudge you have been carrying suddenly seems absurd. The fear of embarrassment dissolves. The hours you spend scrolling through a screen become visibly wasteful. And what remains is only what truly matters. You begin to ask different questions. Is this worth my limited time? Am I living in a way that I would be proud of if this were my last year? Am I holding back from something important because of a fear that will not even exist when I am gone? Death is not the enemy. Forgetting that you will die is the enemy. Because when you forget, you behave as though you have infinite time. You postpone what matters. You tolerate what drains you. You live someone else's version of your life and call it being responsible. The clock is not metaphorical, and the reminder to live accordingly is not morbid. It is the most urgent and loving thing you can tell yourself. These 11 principles were not written by a philosopher in a comfortable study. They were written by a man sitting in military camps during a plague, a man who buried most of his children, a man who ruled an empire he never asked for and carried responsibilities that would have destroyed most people. And yet the words he left behind are not angry. They are not desperate. They are steady, measured, clear. That is what makes them powerful. They were not written from theory. They were written from practice, or from someone who was actively using these ideas to keep his own mind intact under conditions most of us will never face. You have access to the same principles, not because your circumstances are the same, but because the human mind hasn't changed in 2,000 years. The same patterns that created suffering then create suffering now. And the same practices that created clarity then create clarity now. None of this requires perfection. You will forget. You will react. You will fall back into old patterns. That is expected. The practice is not about never failing. It is about returning. Every time you pause instead of reacting. Every time you choose observation over judgment. Every time you release what you cannot control and focus on what you can. You are building something. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a steadiness that over time becomes unshakable. If this way of seeing the world means something to you, there is another video on your screen now that continues this work. Stay with it. And thank you for being here. This is Stoic Undertone.